continuing our series on life-changing relationships. If you remember correctly, we started with the most important relationship. That's our relationship with God. We went from there to familial or family relationships and how we work together and deal with family members. We went from there to friends. This last week was the middle week of our 5-week series, the joy and the need of good friends. And today we're going to talk about the difference that a mentor makes. We need people in our lives who speak to us and help us through issues that we have. And we need mentors, and we need to be mentors. And so we'll talk about that. I remember very vividly in my mind when I was ordained for full-time ministry. There were people all around me with hands on me, and they were praying, and it was a very memorable evening in my life, and it was an evening that would change the course of my entire life, as a matter of fact. And somehow when I was there and I was kneeling there before the pastors and those that had their hands on me, I knew and I felt that I had not made this journey alone by a long shot, that God had helped me every step of the way, and that God had sent loving people into my life to nurture me and to guide me, even from the time when I was just a baby. And many of these people had mentored me along the way, and I was able to make the journey because of the help that I had. So I want to take a look at some mentoring relationships in the Bible this morning. We have some great relationships that we can talk about in the Bible. So Mary, of Mary and Joseph fame. Mary was probably about 14 years old, probably something like that, when the angel Gabriel appeared to her and told her that the Holy Spirit would overshadow her and she would conceive and bear the Son of God. And it was a lot to take in, but Mary accepted God's calling to be the mother of the Son of God. And however, being pregnant and not married could lead to being stoned or killed, if you don't want to know what stone means. And so she traveled to a relative's house, place, about 3 or 4 days' journey. And so she went there to see her relative Elizabeth. So Elizabeth was a cousin, and she was probably somewhere between 54 and 64 years old, somewhere in that range. Now, Mary needed to get away for a while, but she probably was also craving this relationship with an older person who could give her a perspective on life. I mean, she was in a place that no one else had ever been in their lives. I mean, the Son of God. And it was Elizabeth who helped her find the joy in this situation that she was in. That it was not going to be a bad thing, that she would be blessed because of what was being done through her. And there's a picture of mentoring that happens here. So I want us to understand that a mentoring relationship goes two ways, because Elizabeth was also pregnant with a special baby. She had conceived in her old age, 54 to 64 in that range. And when Elizabeth found out she was pregnant, she went into hiding, or she went into seclusion for 5 or 6 months. Now, why would she do that? I mean, we don't know for sure, but maybe she was afraid she would miscarry. Maybe she was self-conscious about being an older woman and being pregnant. Or maybe she was just saying, God, I didn't think you were going to do this at this age. Why didn't you do this when I was 20 so I could handle this great job? But anyway, she went into seclusion. And it was Mary who brought Elizabeth out of seclusion. You see, Mary needed Elizabeth, but Elizabeth also needed Mary, apparently. And here's the thing. We all need an Elizabeth in our lives. We need a more mature person who understands, who can guide us, encourage us. And we all need to be doing that for a younger person. We need to not only be mentored, but we need to mentor. But I also want us to understand that Elizabeth needed Mary. The mentoring relationship went both ways. It would help both women. So spending time together helped them both to see how God was at work in their lives. So I want to ask you, who is your Elizabeth? Who is that person that mentored you, that helped you, that you looked to in times when you needed to know what was going on? Who is that person? And another question, for whom are you being an Elizabeth? To who are you helping along the way? Who can come to you and you will give them sage advice? Who's coming to you that you can share with them some from your wisdom the things you've learned through the years? Who is your Mary? Who is younger than you? Who are you investing in? Who are you encouraging? So I want to say this to our young people that are here today. There's always somebody watching you, and I don't mean that as a judgmental thing. What I want to tell you is that there are always some people that are looking for somebody that makes good decisions so they can go to them when they need help. And so I noticed that even as a young age that people would come to me or to others and they would ask questions. And you have that happen. You go to friends. You go to somebody that's a little bit older. You go to a youth director or a pastor. You go to those people. But even in your youth, you can do mentoring. It's not just something for people 100 years old and up, okay? So know that. Okay, so how many of you, many times the mentor acts as a teacher or a master craftsman, if you will. How many of you ever saw the movie The Karate Kid? You all see the rerun of it, right? 80s movie or late 80s, 90s movie. So there's the Karate Kid, and Daniel wants to learn karate from Mr. Miyagi, right? He's been beaten up, and he just needs some help. And so each day he shows up for a karate lesson. You remember what happens? Mr. Miyagi puts him to work. First, he has to wax his cars. You remember that? Wax on, wax off, right? You remember that? Or which way was it? Was it this way, right? Wax on, wax off, wax on, wax off. Okay. Yeah, he's got my back there. Thank you. The next day, he comes back for a lesson, and Mr. Miyagi tells him to sand the deck. He's down there sanding the deck. Okay? And then he comes back for another lesson. He has him paint the fence. Up and down. Up and down. Remember, he tells him up and down. And then he disappears, and Danielle has to do the paint all day, paint the fence. He comes back for another lesson, and finally he says, paint the house. Left, right, left, right, left, right. So Daniel's about to lose his patience when Mr. Miyagi finally shows him that he's built up some muscles and the reflexes that he will need to defend himself. And that's when Mr. Miyagi shows Daniel that he has learned the gestures that he needs to defend himself. So for Christians, a mentor teaches a person to follow and serve Jesus. That's part of the reason we have the mission statement, the ministry statement we have, is because we're learning, so we're being mentored, and we're inviting, so we're helping mentor others. So we're in the process of both of these. So it's important for us in this church. So Robert Bailey was a man. A lot of you will not know Robert Bailey. Probably nobody knows Robert Bailey, but 2 or 3 of us sit here. Robert Bailey was a young pastor at a church in Hugoton, Kansas, and Rhonda and I moved away from our families to take a job, as a lot of us have done. And Robert and Darlene were the pastors of the church that we just selected to attend. I liked his sermons. I liked their worship style. And so went to Robert, and he said, we'd like for you to become a part of the church. And I said, we were 20 years old or 21. And he said, I'd like for you to be a part of the church. And I said, well, here's the deal, Robert. I said, I don't sit. So if you can find something for me to do, I'll come and be a part of the church. If you don't have anything to do, then I'll find someplace else. Well, Robert gave me stuff to do. He truly believed in me. He let me succeed in ministry. He helped me succeed in life in general. He also let me fail. He let me do some things wrong. But there were always words of wisdom and some help when I asked. And so for years now, I've modeled my relationships with coworkers on how Robert Bailey mentored me. His willingness to place his trust and his confidence in this young, boisterous man helped place in me an undying love for our younger people and those that I want to invest in my life. What I saw him do, that's what I wanted to do. Roscoe Nelson's another man whose life I watched to become a better person. Roscoe was Rhonda's dad. He's my father-in-law. And he helped when we desperately needed it. He supported us in times and when we had no one else to support us. I appreciated his ministry. He was a godsend many times. Archie Burress, my dad, also modeled for me what it meant to pastor and what it meant to give yourself completely to God and the church. So I've had some mentors, as I'm sure you could give me names of mentors that you've had as well. But this is the kind of relationship that Paul had with Timothy. Now, Timothy traveled with Paul. Paul was an older man, and Timothy was a young man starting off in ministry. And he closely observed Paul's teaching and the way of life with its suffering and persecution that Paul had often. So Paul even wrote Timothy when he was in jail, and he wrote to him. And so let's listen to what Paul has to say to Timothy. He says this in 2 Timothy chapter 3. But you have paid attention to my teaching, conduct, purpose, faithfulness, patience, love, and endurance. You have seen me experience physical abuse and ordeals in places such as Antioch, Iconium, and Lystra. I put up with all sorts of abuse, and the Lord rescued me from it all. And then down in the 4th chapter, verse 5, he says, but you must keep yourself, or keep control of yourself in all circumstances. So he's going on to mentor him after he says, you've seen me do these things. He says, endure suffering. Do the work of a preacher of the good news, and carry out your service fully. So we watch, we learn, and we do. I know that in the medical profession, that you watch the teacher do the procedure, and then the student does a procedure, you do the procedure yourself, and then finally the student then, who was a student, teaches someone else to do the procedure, and that's how it continues through in the medical arena. And that's also how we teach in church. We've seen, some of us that are a little bit older in here today, we've seen some mighty people of God do some great work and great faithfulness. And we have loved those people and appreciated those people. And now it's time for some of us that are older to be those people to the younger people, for people to see in us the work of God and the love of God. Our children's and youth ministries are very intentional about teaching our youth and children to serve others. We're helping our children and youth learn what it means to share and to serve and share God's love and to anyone who's in need. And we're also about developing relationships across the generations. I love the fact that when we go through confirmation, that we have mentors, adult mentors who help them. I think CIA group of our kids, they do some great things helping. And when we have our stewardship lunch here at the end of next month, they're going to be serving again. I love it when that happens. This evening, our youth are going to be painting a building out back that desperately needs some paint. And they're going to be helping and serving. People may not even notice it, but that's not what's important. What's important is they're willing to serve and do what needs to be done. So I believe that we are a stronger church when our youth and know our children, and our regular youth and children know our adults, and our adults know our children. We need those relationships back and forth across the generations. So let me say something to those of us who are a little bit older in here today. I want to encourage you not to resent or fear or to judge our younger generations, which are Generation X and millennials, right? I believe in them because, I believe in them, and I like the fact that they need us. I also like the fact that God values them and us. So here, it doesn't matter how old you are. If you're not dead, you're not done, right? You've heard that? Your best days are still before you. Remember that? Keep thinking that. Keep believing that. Here's the deal. Your best days are before you if you invest in young people. That's honest truth. If you'll invest in those younger than you, your best days are still in front of you because your work and your love will be carried on through younger generations. Work with the younger generations and help them become leaders. Give them the ability to succeed or fail. Now, I want you to remember to be yourself, because that authenticity trumps cool. You just got to be who you are. In our younger generations, they want you to be authentic. But you can be spiritual fathers and mothers to those who are coming along behind us, those who are working with us, if will. And now a word to the younger generations. Um, you need the older generations. The baby boomers, the greatest generation. You need them more than you really know that you do. Uh, what word describes many of our 20-year-olds and teenagers in our society today? There's one word that has been used in our society to describe them. It's entitled, right? I'm not making this up. This is just you go out and see. When I was a kid, if I won something, I got a trophy. I don't have any trophies. I didn't win, right? My granddaughter has lots of trophies. I don't know that she's ever won anything, but she has trophies because everybody gets a trophy, right? We get a participation trophy. And so what's happening in your society, I'm not down talking, I'm not saying anything bad, I'm just saying this is what's happening in our society. Because you feel entitled, you typically overestimate what you can do in the short run, okay? But here's the thing, you will almost always underestimate what you can do in the long run. You will not see yourself doing the things that you're going to be doing in the long run. So keep your faith and keep the faithful life for the long haul, because you're going to be greater than what you even know you can be. Here's another thing for our younger generation. Showing honor in public leads to influence in private. So if you'll honor people, those that come before you, when you're around other people, they will respect you, and you'll see that even in private. Respect is earned, but honor is given. You can give honor to somebody. And people become more honorable when you honor them. So if you see somebody that you don't think is all that honorable, if you honor them, they probably will live up to that. And serve those who are your bosses as you grow up. Do that faithfully. God will honor that. And here's the thing. Don't try to copy always what somebody else does, but instead learn how a mentor thinks. Learn how they think so you can start that process and you can think for yourself and do for yourself, because that's what we all need to do. See, it's in working across the generations that we carry the mission and ministry of Jesus Christ into the future. You see, one of the most important things that we can do is to train a younger person to do the ministry that we are currently doing. If you are in the 50, 60 range and up, we desperately need to be training other people, younger people, to fill the spots that we are filling. Not because they can take it over today or tomorrow, but because we always won't be around. And that's part of what the people ahead of us did for us and what we need to do. So I hope you're paying attention, because the day of our older generations where we won't be here to fix all the problems, that's going to be, it's going to happen. And so we're going to need some of that younger and olders working together. So another story. Elijah and Elisha. You remember the story? Elijah, here's a great man of God. He's defeated the prophets of Baal. He's doing this awesome job of being his fire contest. They cut themselves and they can't do anything. They can't get this fire to come from heaven. They're having this big contest thing at this big worship altar. And so Elijah, when it's his turn, there's 450 of the prophets of Baal, which is a false god, by the way. And then here comes up Elijah, the one prophet. He has them come up and pour water on the altar. He comes up, has them pour even more water. He has them pour so much water on that water's running everywhere. And then he prays, and fire comes down. Now, what happens is that he gets to get rid of all the prophets of Baal. So that's one of those things that happens in the Old Testament. He kills 450 prophets of Baal. Queen Jezebel threatened to kill him then. And so he takes off and runs and hides. He flees for his life, and he sinks into this deep depression. He's out in the middle of nowhere. There's nobody around. And he just asked God to kill him. And seriously, he just said, God, just kill me, get rid of me, because I'm the only one that's honoring you. I'm the only one that's serving you. I'm the only one that's remained faithful. But the Lord appeared to Elijah, and he ministered to Elijah. And God told Elijah to go and anoint Elisha, in case Elijah and Elisha, to be a prophet for God. Now, I want you to know that when life gets to be too overwhelming, the Lord sends a helper in your life. So it was just too much for Elijah. He couldn't handle it. He listened to God, and God helped him and gave him someone to mentor and to help him. And sometimes it's a friend who will minister to your needs, like the angel did to Elijah when he brought food and so forth. Other times, it's a partner to share in our work, and that's what happens here. In this process, the Lord gave Elijah an associate to help him, Elisha, to help him to be success as the Lord's prophet. And the same thing still happens in the church today. You know, some of you have carried the burden of the church for many years. You've been faithful. You've done what the Lord has asked you to do. And well done, good and faithful servant. One of the things that this story can help us see is that we need to pass on the work. We need to help others understand how the work needs to happen. One of the greatest gifts that a mature Christian can give is to train others to share in the work of the church. Not just do it all, but train and help others learn. So Elijah sought out Elisha, and he began to share his wisdom and his experiences with him. And Elisha served him, was a servant, and followed him and did what he needed done. And Elisha was willing to serve and follow him, all those things. So Elisha knows that his mentor, his guide, his master, his father figure, if you will, isn't going to be around forever. In fact, the time has come in this verses we're going to read. This happens in 2 Kings chapter 2. And this is, I'll read the story, just follow along there. Now the Lord was going to take Elijah up to heaven in a windstorm, and Elijah and Elisha were leaving Gilgal, one of the towns. And Elijah said to Elisha, "Stay here, because the Lord has sent me to Bethel." But Elisha said, "As the Lord lives, and as you live, I won't leave you." So they went down to Bethel. The group of prophets from Bethel, apparently there were some other prophets also that Elijah did not know about, but the group of prophets from Bethel came out to Elisha. These prophets said to Elisha, "Do you know that the Lord is going to take your master away from you today?" And Elisha said, "Yes, I know. Don't talk about it." You ever had one of those things? You know things are going to happen, you're going to miss somebody, and you just say, "Don't talk about it." That's where Elisha's at here. Don't talk about it. But Elijah said, "Elisha, stay here, because the Lord has sent me to Jericho." But Elisha said, "As the Lord lives, and as you live, I won't leave you." So they went to Jericho. The group of prophets from Jericho approached Elisha. Now there were some other prophets, and now there's prophets in Jericho. The prophets from Jericho approached Elisha and said to him, do you know that the Lord is going to take your master away from you today?" He said, "Yes, I know. Don't talk about it. Leave me alone." La, 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 right? Elijah said to Elisha, "Stay here, because the Lord has sent me to the Jordan." But Elisha said, "As the Lord lives, and as you live, I won't leave you." So both of them went on together. 50 members of the group of prophets also went along, but they stood at a distance. Both Elijah and Elisha stood beside the Jordan River. Now listen to this. Elijah then took his coat. It was kind of a mantle thing, went over. He rolled it up and hit the water. When the water was divided in two, both of them crossed over on dry ground. Wow, across the Jordan River. When they had crossed, Elijah said to Elisha, "What do you want me to do for you before I'm taken away from you?" Okay, now here's the big question. The question must have made Elisha wonder, what do I need? I need to know how to carry on. I need to know how I can be a prophet. When everything I know I've learned from you and you're about to leave, I need to know a little bit more. I need to know how to be a leader, because all I know is how to follow. I need to know what to say when the people turn to listen to the Lord and they're expecting me to say it. I need you to stay. But look, Elisha said, this is what he finally says. He says, "Let me have twice your spirit." Wow. Now Elijah's big. I don't know if you realize how big Elijah is in Israel history. It's Elijah and Moses. Okay? Those are the two biggies. And then you throw in Jesus and you got the Christian Trinity, not the Holy Trinity. Matter of fact, Elijah and Joshua and Jesus, the names all come from the same root. Okay? That's how important, that's how big Elijah is. And Elisha says, I want twice what you've got. Think about that. Twice. Elijah said, you've made a difficult request. If you can see me when I'm taken from you, then it will be yours. If you don't see me, it won't happen. Ouch. Well, yeah, now I'm staying with you for sure, right? So Elijah is such a central figure in the imagination of Israel's faith. His prophetic ministry, his meaning, and his purpose were divinely authorized. We see that time and again. But who would embody them when Elijah the man is gone? Elisha is the top candidate. He's the favorite son, the one to receive the blessing. Elijah is unsure of his ability to take up the mantle, to carry on in the tough times when you have to speak for God and it's not popular, in the middle of injustice and oppression and the political power games that were going on then as they are today. So Elijah says to Elijah, he says he wants a double portion, a double share of the Spirit. He asks for a double portion. The same Spirit that empowered and enlivened Elijah, he wants that times two. Even though he's probably unsure unsure that he has actually what it takes. Let's continue the passage. So they were walking along, talking, when suddenly a fiery chariot and fiery horses appeared and separated the two of them. Then Elijah went to heaven in a windstorm. Elisha was watching, and he cried out, "Oh, my father, Israel's chariots and its riders." When he could no longer see him, Elisha took hold of his clothes and ripped them in two. Now, this would have been an action they would have done in deep mourning, okay? In deep grief. They would take their clothes and rend them in two. Then Elisha picked up the coat that had fallen from Elijah, the same coat that he had wound up, and the waters had parted at the Jordan. And he went back and stood beside the banks of the Jordan River. He took the coat that had fallen from Elijah and hit the water. He said, "Where is the Lord, Elijah's God?" And when he hit the water, it divided in two. Then Elisha crossed over. The group of prophets from Jericho saw him from a distance. They said, "Elijah's spirit has settled on Elisha." So they came out to meet him, bowing down before him. Fathers and mothers pass on spirit to sons and daughters. That's what happens. Mentors pass on spirit to disciples. It's inevitable, and it haunts these relationships throughout. The older must die or move on, and the younger must pick up the mantle, do the things the father, the mother, the teacher did, and then maybe even do them better. The spirit, the authority, the empowerment must be passed on, and it must be taken up with courage. Elisha sees Elijah mysteriously taken up into the sky, into the infinity and beyond. But he can't just keep staring up there, right? The chariot of fire gets in the way, but the story doesn't say that Elijah was taken up in the fiery chariot. It just says it came and it separated them, and then it says Elijah went up. See, you can't keep staring, waiting for the one who taught you and loved you and encouraged you to come back and make things all better. It's like Elijah. It's somewhere between, you get somewhere beyond the sun. But if Elisha just keeps staring, waiting, it's like you're staring in this light, right? If you just did that, then you go blind. I'm already having trouble seeing because I look back there. You just go blind. He has to start living in the spirit that the mentor left with him. He has to live with that in himself. Elisha tears his clothes, grieves the loss of his spiritual father. He has to grieve. He has to face the fear of picking up the mantle and doing what he thought only one other person could do. Now it's his turn. But then he picks it up and he finds himself doing the things Elijah did. He begins to trust the same spirit at work in his mentor that's now at work in him. And if you read through, you'll see that doubly so when you read through that. He continues on with the blessing of the Father, the mentor, the teacher, and he knows it. I want to close with this. So today we remember and we honor our mentors, those who have passed on. And I think if we're quiet for just a moment every once in a while, we can still hear their voices speaking words of wisdom in our ear. Can't you hear that sometimes? And when we listen, we remember that our spiritual mentors were guided by the same Holy Spirit that fills you and me today. By the grace of God, today I invite you to pick up the mantle, to continue the ministry that our mentors have passed on to us. My prayer is that God will bless us as we step into this new day of ministry together. We're going to, in just a moment, we're going to pray a prayer, and then the band's going to sing their last song, and then we're going to do the big reveal and all that at the end. But here's what I want us to do during this time when they're playing the song and we're praying. I want you to thank God for that person or those persons that was your mentor, those persons that were there for you, that helped you, that helped develop you, make you who you are. And then also, I want you to either pray for the people, the persons that you're mentoring, or ask God to give you someone to mentor or persons to mentor. Everybody needs a mentor. It's so important in life. So extremely important. And if we have good mentors, our lives are much better. God, we come to you, and I thank you